This all started when my sister Ashley was diagnosed with severe autism and ADHD at around the age of 2. It was normal, just a lot of temper tantrums, but at the age of 5, she finally learned that she can do anything she wants without consequences. Whenever I had something she didn't have, my parents would always either get her the same thing or I had to give it to her. I always tried to argue back, but my parents always said I was being unfair and to be nice to my sister because of her condition. On some occasions, she would even run into my room and brag if Mom was taking her to the store or got a new toy that I didn't have. I was pretty fed up with this, so I decided to save up allowance money for a lock for my door so I could get some privacy. After my sister tried to barge into my room and realized she couldn't open it, she started to complain to my parents about it. I tried explaining to my parents how she can't keep barging into my room. My parents argued back, saying how I'm being selfish and how I should just let her do it because of her condition. I couldn't win against them, and I had to remove the lock. Fast forward a few months, I just turned 9. I wanted to go to a local arcade with all my friends, but of course, my sister was complaining about how she couldn't choose where my party was. But thankfully, my parents didn't let her choose. When we got to the arcade, it was all fine until we went back into the party room. I was horrified. Apparently, my parents left my sister in the room for a few minutes to go get me and my friends, and when we came back, the cake was all over the floor, and most of the presents were torn open or destroyed. I was trying to hold back my tears while my sister had a big grin on her face. My dad had to bring her home. However, like all things she did, she got away with it. My mom was telling me she can't help it, it wasn't her fault. The only thing you can do right now is to deal with it. I broke down into tears after hearing what she said and stormed out of the room. Fast forward a few weeks, I have barely been talking to my parents. Every chance I got, I would avoid them. Thankfully, my parents let me install the lock back on my door after Ashley went into my room while I was changing. Ever since Ashley got into 1st grade, she has constantly been asking for help with her homework, and by help, I mean playing games while I have to do it. My parents are always busy during work, so they force me to help her. One day, Ashley's teacher decided to assign her class a project. The project was to make your favorite fast food restaurant from cereal boxes. She decided not to do anything until the last day before it was due. Like usual, I had to help her again. I was panicking because it was like 9 o'clock and my bedtime was 10 o'clock. I was asking her what her favorite fast food place was. She didn't respond until 30 minutes went by and she said, "You choose." I was about to scream. I chose the easiest one to make, which was McDonald's. 50 minutes go by, I finished the project, but what she did made me almost want to unalive her. She decided to throw it across the room and stomp on it. My parents went to check to see all the noise, and my sister is on the floor pretending to cry, saying how I broke it and how I want her to fail. I was shocked. My parents sided with her again. Even before I got to argue back, I was grounded for weeks. I felt like I wanted to unalive myself. However, I couldn't do it. Fast forward until I was 17, my sister just turned 14, and she decided to bring her friend home. I thought nothing of it. She had friends over all the time, but this time was different. I went to the bathroom for like 5 minutes. When I got out, my room was trashed, bed sheets all over the place, pillows in every corner, lamp knocked over. They even threw my computer on the floor. If you were wondering, yes, I still had the lock, but they picked the lock. Apparently, her friend was good at picking locks. My parents were on vacation. When I called them to tell them about it, they just told me I was lying and to stop trying to get my sister in trouble all the time. I decided I needed to move far away. I spent all junior and senior year working hard to get a good scholarship. Fast forward a year later, I had my graduation. My parents and grandparents were all there except for my sister. My parents came up with the excuse of how she was sick and she couldn't go, but they used that excuse so many times that I couldn't even care anymore. Graduation was really fun. Me and my friends hosted an after party at my house. My sister was nowhere in sight. My parents said she was sick, but she wasn't even at home, or so I thought. Probably an hour later, we went to my room to hang out, only to see my sister with her friends eating all over my bed. I saw crushed up chips all over the floor. I had enough. When my parents saw this, they were furious, grounded my sister for a full month, and her friends were never allowed over. I was glad, but more glad to get away from here. Fast forward a few months, I said my goodbyes to my parents and I headed to a college out of the country. My sister was crying when I left, mainly because I couldn't do her schoolwork for her anymore. She had to repeat 10th grade again after she failed her finals after being caught cheating on her phone. My parents were furious about this. I don't know if she got punished or not from this since it wasn't spoken about much. Fast forward a few weeks, college was great so far. Me and this girl, Michaela, share a dorm. We became really great friends. We hung out and ate dinner together almost every night. I had majored as an information technology specialist. Going to class every day, I sit next to my future husband, Steven. It was almost love at first sight. I was a bit nervous to ask him out on the first day, but on the second day, I had the courage to ask him out. He said he would love to, and he thought I was pretty cute. Happiness filled my eyes, and I hugged him without thinking. I thought I made a big mistake, but to my surprise, he was fine with it. Fast forward 3 years later, me and Steven finally graduated from college and got job offers at an office. After a while of us saving money, we bought a lovely male 2-bedroom, 1-bath house about 15 minutes from our office. It had been a while since I checked up on my parents. I started a FaceTime call with them. We both have been telling each other what has been going on in our lives. She started to mention how Ashley just graduated from high school and how she would love for you to come visit again. We didn't mind taking a vacation. After we got off the plane, I saw my parents waiting for me, but not Ashley. Apparently, Ashley still lives with them and doesn't have any plans on going to college. My parents were fine with it and supported her decision. We all decided to go out for dinner the same night. It was going good until Ashley started to flirt with Steven, which made him a bit uncomfortable. I don't really remember what he said, but I think he said, "No thanks," or "I'm not interested." Ashley was a bit embarrassed, but she had another idea. She decided to scoot her chair closer to him, which prompted him to push her away, making him a bit pissed off. She then decided to lean on him, saying how she is so much better than I and how she is prettier. This got him pissed off so much that he just left the restaurant. Fast forward 8 years, me and Steven are about to have our wedding. We had low contact with my parents and sister, but we still invited them. I thought my sister would have grown up by now. We had our wedding at this nice hotel. On the wedding day, everything was looking beautiful. Everyone was there except my sister. My parents said she was running late. That was until she came in the door with a full-on wedding dress. I was shocked to see her do that. When I called her out on it, she just said how she should just be able to wear it and how it costs so much. I went off on her. I told her that I had sent out a dress code multiple times and how if you would have read the texts I sent, this wouldn't have happened. She started to cry and my parents started to defend her, saying how she could just take the dress off and it will be fine. I thought it would be okay. Fast forward to where I was walking down the aisle. Ashley was sitting with her arms crossed. I didn't mind it. As me and Steven said our I do's, my sister jumped up and said, "Boo, when are we going to get the cake?" Everyone in the room was staring at her. My parents, who were sitting next to her, looked really embarrassed. My parents tried to get her out of the room when she ran out of their arms and went right for the cake. The cake was all over the ground, and I see her just eating it. Security had to escort her out. I was holding back my tears as she just ruined my whole wedding in front of me. After the wedding, I decided to block Ashley from every site, and I decided to post about how she ruined my wedding. I'm starting to feel guilty. Was blocking her the right thing to do? To add, it's been about an hour since I posted this. I have seen some of your comments. Me and Steven decided to redo the wedding. We would have the wedding on July 1st. I'm thankful for all the support, and I'll keep you guys updated. Now, for a few comments before the update, comment 1, not the idiot. Op, you did the right thing by blocking her. No need to feel bad. You are better off without her anyway. I think you should go no contact with her in the future. It's better for you, your husband, and your future children. Comment 2, not the idiot. I would send your parents a bill for the cake and a significant amount more. I would also publicly post about everything your sister did and how your parents encouraged her to do it. Now, for the update, thanks for reading my last post. So a lot has happened in the past 2 weeks, and I wanted to update you all on everything. First off, Steven and I decided to go ahead with our plan to redo the wedding. We set the new date for July 1st and started making arrangements. We were both excited, but also a bit anxious given what happened last time. We decided to keep the guest list smaller this time, inviting only our closest friends and family. My parents were still invited, but I made it clear that Ashley was not welcome. They were upset, but I stood my ground. In the meantime, Stephen and I had to deal with the fallout from the last wedding. We had to explain to our friends and extended family why we were having another ceremony. Most people were understanding, but there were a few who thought we were being overly dramatic. It was frustrating, but we tried to focus on the positive. One day, while we were out shopping for wedding supplies, I got a call from my mom. She sounded frantic and told me that Ashley had gone missing. Apparently, she had a huge meltdown after finding out she wasn't invited to the new wedding and ran away from home. My parents were beside themselves with worry and begged me to help find her. I was torn. On one hand, I was still furious with Ashley for ruining our first wedding. On the other hand, she was my sister, and I couldn't just ignore the situation. Stephen and I decided to drive back to my hometown to help look for her. We spent the next few days searching everywhere we could think of: parks, malls, her friends' houses. It was exhausting and emotionally draining. During this time, I couldn't help but reflect on our childhood and how things had gotten so bad between us. I remembered a time when Ashley and I were close before her condition became such a dominant force in our lives. It made me sad to think about how much had changed. After 3 days of searching, we finally found Ashley at a local library. She was sitting in a corner looking lost and scared. When she saw us, she broke down in tears. I hugged her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of the sisterly bond we used to have. We took her home, and my parents were incredibly grateful. They apologized for everything that had happened and promised to get Ashley the help she needed. Back at home, Stephen and I continued with our wedding plans. We decided to have a small, intimate ceremony in our backyard. It was a lot less stressful than planning a big event, and it felt more personal. As the day approached, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and anxiety. I wanted everything to go perfectly this time. On the day of the wedding, everything went smoothly. The weather was perfect, and our closest friends and family were there to celebrate with us. My parents attended, but they respected my wishes and didn't bring Ashley. The ceremony was beautiful, and as Stephen and I exchanged vows, I felt a sense of peace and happiness that I hadn't felt in a long time. After the ceremony, we had a small reception with food, drinks, and music. It was a wonderful evening, and I felt grateful for the love and support of everyone around us. As the night went on, I couldn't help but think about Ashley and how she was doing. I knew that our relationship would never be perfect, but I hoped that we could find a way to move forward. In the days following the wedding, I decided to reach out to Ashley. I sent her a message letting her know that I still cared about her and wanted to work on our relationship. To my surprise, she responded positively. She apologized for everything that had happened and admitted that she needed help. It was a small step, but it felt like a step in the right direction. As for my parents, they have been making an effort to support both Ashley and me. They have been more understanding and have started to set boundaries with Ashley, which has made a big difference. It's not perfect, but it's progress. Looking back on everything, I realize that our family has a lot of healing to do. But for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. Stephen and I are starting our new life together, and I'm optimistic about the future. Thank you all for your support and for reading my updates. Am I the idiot for confronting my dad after he filed a restraining order against my mom over my grandma's will? My dad, 49-year-old male, and mom, 47-year-old female, have had an on and off marriage throughout my 29-year-old female life. They had 3 children and married young. At some point in my adolescence, they divorced for the first time, remarrying again a few years later. Fast forward approximately 8 years, they divorced again. It was an ugly divorce both times. My parents do not speak to one another and cannot be civil to be in the same room as one another. My dad has gone on to remarry, and my mom is now engaged. On Tuesday, my dad called me with news to share. He said that my mom's grandma, 96-year-old female, was in the hospital and that he was made power of attorney and listed in her will to receive everything and divide as deemed appropriate approximately 5 years ago. He stated that it was not his decision, but is what Granny wanted. From what I understand, 4 or 5 years ago is when my mom and grandma got into a dispute and parted ways. A year later, the dispute was settled, and my mom resumed her duties of taking care of her. My great-grandma, Granny, is a very strong, stubborn, self-sufficient woman living in the middle of nowhere, still having an outhouse for a restroom. My mom has taken her to the grocery store, doctor's appointments, etc., in the last few years. We recently learned that she is struggling with kidney failure, but has continued to not let that get her down. My dad has maintained routine visits once a month or so to check on Granny to see if she needs anything, etc. On Monday, Granny called emergency medical services to assist her as she stated her legs weren't working and she wanted to get checked out. She was admitted to the hospital to get checked out. She called my mom to come pick her up and let her know what was going on. When my mom was on her way to pick her up, the hospital called and stated that she's not being released and will be in the hospital for a few more days. Granny asked Mom to lock up her house and make sure all the valuables were gone to make sure no one would break in and have anything to take. On Wednesday, my dad found out she was in the hospital as he asked my sister, 24-year-old female, if Granny was okay, as his wife did not see my mom and her at Walmart, where the wife works, on their normally scheduled day and time. From there, my dad informed my mom that he was her power of attorney and sole beneficiary of everything. Of course, my mom was upset after finding this out. I was an advocate for my dad through all of this, as it was not him that forced himself into this position, and it was what Granny wanted. My dad and I spoke about all plans being made with the group, Granny's grandchildren and he, and that he did not care who got what as long as everyone agreed. I continued to be the mediator between all parties. Now for an update. On Friday, my mom called to let me know that my dad had called the police on her for allegedly taking items from her home. I called my dad to see if it were true, and he agreed. And I asked how he knows it was my mom, and he continued to reply, because I know. He arrived at the hospital with the officers in tow to get Granny to file charges against my mom for the alleged theft. The officers located the box at my sister's home. I told my dad if he continues to press the issue and have my mom arrested, I refuse to be a reflection of his decisions and can no longer support and advocate for him in this issue. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Your grandma is still alive? Why does he put himself above her? She doesn't need a power of attorney until she is unable to speak for herself. In the meantime, if she wants to give her things away to others or decides to change her will or pick someone else as power of attorney, she can. Your dad is prematurely trying to use her power, but she hasn't transferred it to him yet. Comment 2. As long as your grandma is alive and competent, the power of attorney is not active. Period. Sit down with your grandmother and ask her if she'd like to make any changes to her will or power of attorney, then leave it all alone. It's her decision to make. Now for the update. Thank you for reading my last post. On Saturday, things took a turn for the worse. My mom called me in tears, saying that she had been served with a restraining order filed by my dad. He claimed that she was a threat to Granny and that she had been harassing him ever since she found out about the power of attorney situation. My mom was devastated and felt completely blindsided. She insisted that she had only been trying to help Granny and that my dad was blowing things out of proportion. I felt torn between my parents, but I knew I had to get to the bottom of this. I decided to visit Granny in the hospital to see how she was doing and to get her perspective on everything. When I arrived, she seemed frail, but in good spirits. She was surprised to hear about the restraining order and the accusations against my mom. Granny told me that she had never asked my dad to file any charges or take any legal action against my mom. She said that she appreciated all the help my mom had given her over the years and that she didn't want any more conflict in the family. After talking to Granny, I felt more determined to resolve this mess. I called a family meeting with my siblings to discuss what was happening and to come up with a plan. My sister was still upset about the police finding the box at her house, and my brother, 27-year-old male, was frustrated with the constant drama between our parents. We all agreed that we needed to confront our dad and get him to drop the charges and the restraining order. On Sunday, we went to my dad's house to talk to him. He was defensive at first, insisting that he was just trying to protect Granny and that my mom was out of control. We explained that Granny didn't want any legal action taken and that this was causing more harm than good. My dad seemed to soften a bit when he heard that Granny didn't support his actions. He agreed to meet with my mom and Granny to discuss everything and try to find a resolution. The meeting was tense, but it was clear that everyone wanted to find a way to move forward. My mom apologized for any misunderstandings and assured my dad that she only wanted to help Granny. My dad admitted that he had overreacted and agreed to drop the charges and the restraining order. Granny thanked everyone for coming together and asked that we all work together to support her during this difficult time. By Monday, things seemed to be calming down. My dad and mom agreed to communicate through me and my siblings to avoid any further conflicts. We all took turns visiting Granny in the hospital and making sure she had everything she needed. It felt like we were finally starting to come together as a family, despite the ongoing tension between my parents. On Tuesday, I received a call from Granny's doctor with some concerning news. Granny's kidney failure had progressed, and she needed to start dialysis immediately. The doctor explained that this would require regular trips to the hospital and a strict treatment schedule. I knew that this would be a challenge for Granny, given her stubborn and independent nature, but I also knew that we needed to support her through this. I called another family meeting to discuss how we could help Granny with her dialysis treatments. My mom offered to take her to the hospital for her appointments, and my dad agreed to help with any other needs she might have. My siblings and I also volunteered to pitch in and make sure Granny had everything she needed at home. It felt good to see everyone working together for a common goal, even if it was just for Granny's sake. On Wednesday, I took Granny to her first dialysis appointment. She was nervous, but tried to put on a brave face. I could tell that she was struggling with the idea of losing her independence, but she also knew that this was necessary for her health. As we sat in the waiting room, she opened up to me about her past and the reasons behind her decisions. Granny told me that she had always been a strong-willed and independent woman, even from a young age. She had grown up during the Great Depression and had learned to fend for herself and her family. She explained that her decision to make my dad her power of attorney was not meant to hurt my mom, but rather to ensure that her wishes were respected. She had seen too many families torn apart by disputes over wills and wanted to avoid that for us. Hearing Granny's story gave me a new perspective on everything that had happened. I realized that her decisions were rooted in her desire to protect her family and ensure that we all got along. It made me even more determined to keep the peace and support her through her dialysis treatments. By Thursday, things were starting to settle down. My mom and dad were still not on speaking terms, but they were at least willing to work together for Granny's sake. My siblings and I continued to take turns visiting Granny and helping her with her appointments. It felt like we were finally starting to find a new normal, even if it was a bit rocky. On Friday, I received a call from my dad. He sounded more relaxed than he had in weeks and thanked me for helping to mediate the situation. He admitted that he had let his emotions get the best of him and that he was grateful for my support. It was a small step, but it felt like progress. As the week came to an end, I felt a sense of relief. We still had a long way to go, but it felt like we were finally starting to come together as a family. Granny's health was still a concern, but we were all committed to supporting her and each other through this difficult time. Thank you for reading. Am I the idiot for leaving my cheating husband and refusing to be his maid? My husband, 26-year-old male, and I, 24-year-old female, have been married for 6 months, together for 3 years. When we met, it seemed as though everything was perfect. My family loved him and his family loved me, and we built a great network of friends around us. Where we're from, it's common for adults, men and women, to continue living with their parents until they get married. So that's what we were both doing. At the time, he was working a decent job for his age and skill level, while I was doing some freelance work and trying to build a business. However, I'm not legally allowed to work as a foreign woman where we live, despite being highly overqualified. Anyway, fast forward to 3 months before the wedding. I got distracted trying to plan everything. His family wanted a big wedding, and we spent a lot of time looking for a place and furnishing it. We split everything in half, but legally, he's required to pay rent. Although once I was making enough money, I fully intended on splitting the expenses 50-50. It was stressful, but we eventually got through it. However, my plans to launch my business got pushed back, and I had to postpone taking on any new clients until after we're settled. Once we started living together, the problems began. He almost never helped out with household chores or anything, so I would end up spending hours each day doing them. He also expected dinner to be ready by the time he got home, but didn't like it when I worked after he got back. So, I almost never had time to focus on my work. And despite making it clear that I had no intention of becoming a housewife, it seemed like I unintentionally found myself in that role. The issue is that he expected me to do all the homemaker duties without fulfilling any of his breadwinner responsibilities. He would constantly bring up that he pays the rent and the bills. He would always blindside me by getting groceries without me, so he can pick and choose what he deems necessary, without taking into account that I have to deal with cooking and using what he bought for the house. He would argue with me for hours whenever I'd ask him for money to pay my phone bill or get a cup of coffee when out with friends. Mind you, I never asked him to take me shopping, and he never has. Yet, he was perfectly fine splurging on himself every month as soon as his paycheck came in. When I suggested a grocery budget of around $200 per month, he told me it was too much and asked me to cut it down. So, for a while, all we ate was chicken, tuna, and eggs for dinner. Eventually, he told me he's been dealing with some debt due to all the wedding expenses 6 months prior. But 2 days later, he went on to buy himself a new luxury watch. He also doesn't support me emotionally, mentally, or professionally, and constantly minimizes what I do, despite knowing well that I'm on a road to success. I have brought up my concerns in every way possible and tried to find every solution for our problems, but he never seemed to care or listen. A few weeks ago, we had a big fight and I blew up everything by telling my family, who were shocked by everything I told them, and think divorce now is better than once kids are involved. Since the fight, he said he's been working on himself and towards fixing our issues. He said that it's only been 6 months and that I should give our marriage a chance. I'm not sure I have any more chances left to give. So, am I the idiot for blowing up the marriage only 6 months after saying our vows? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. This honestly is how financial abuse starts. He wants to control all the money while actively impeding your attempts to get your business up and running, so you are completely dependent on him. Men like this have very fragile egos, so tread carefully. Don't rush into leaving without getting all your ducks in a row. You said you can't work in that country as a foreigner. Is there a way for him to mess with your visa status? I would put on a brave face while you get your exit strategy worked out. Comment 2. Not the idiot. You aren't divorcing him because he's stingy. Stingy would be he's buying the cheapest brands to save a buck. But the man is out there buying luxury watches. You're divorcing him for being sexist, unsupportive, and completely lacking in empathy. Ideally, you'd have seen those signs before you married, but you have seen absolutely no effort on his part in trying to change his behavior after getting married, so I can't see how waiting any longer would improve anything. Now for the update. Thanks for all the comments from the last post. So here's what's been happening over the past week. After our big fight, my husband promised he would work on himself and try to fix our issues. For the first few days, it seemed like he was making an effort. He started helping out a bit more around the house, like doing the dishes and even cooking dinner once. I thought maybe things were finally turning around. But then, things took a turn for the worse. One evening, I found a receipt for an expensive dinner in his jacket pocket. When I confronted him about it, he said it was a business dinner. I wanted to believe him, but something didn't feel right. I decided to dig a little deeper. I checked his phone while he was in the shower, and I found messages from a woman I didn't know. They were flirty and suggested they had been seeing each other for a while. My heart sank. I felt betrayed and hurt. I confronted him again, and he admitted to having an affair. He said it started a few months before our wedding and that he didn't know how to end it. He apologized and said he wanted to make things right, but I couldn't believe him anymore. The trust was completely shattered. I decided to tell my family about the affair. They were furious and insisted I leave him immediately. My parents offered to let me stay with them until I figured things out. I packed a bag and left that night. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I knew I couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies. Living with my parents has been a mix of relief and frustration. They've been supportive, but they also keep reminding me that they warned me about him. It's hard to hear, but I know they're just trying to help. I've been trying to focus on my work and get my business off the ground, but it's been tough with everything going on. A few days after I moved out, my husband showed up at my parents' house, begging me to come back. He said he ended the affair and wanted to go to counseling. I told him I needed time to think. I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive him, but I also didn't want to make any rash decisions. While I was trying to figure things out, I got a call from one of our mutual friends. She told me that my husband had been spreading lies about me, saying I was the one who cheated and that I was trying to ruin his life. I was furious. I couldn't believe he would stoop so low. I decided to cut off all contact with him and focus on myself. In the midst of all this, I found out that I'm pregnant. I was shocked and didn't know what to do. I hadn't told anyone yet, not even my parents. I was scared of how they would react and what this would mean for my future. I knew I couldn't stay with my husband, but I also didn't want to raise a child on my own. I finally decided to tell my parents about the pregnancy. They were surprised but supportive. They assured me that they would help me through this and that I didn't have to go back to my husband. It was a relief to know I had their support, but I was still scared about what the future held. I also told my husband about the pregnancy. He was shocked and said he wanted to be involved in the baby's life. I told him that we needed to figure out a way to co-parent without being together. He agreed, but I could tell he was hurt. I didn't know if he was genuinely sorry or just trying to manipulate me. As I was dealing with all of this, I started to think about my past and how I ended up in this situation. I remembered how my husband and I met and how everything seemed perfect at first. I realized that I had ignored a lot of red flags because I wanted to believe in the fairy tale. I thought about my parents' marriage and how they always seemed so happy. I wanted that for myself, but I knew now that it wasn't going to happen with my husband. I also thought about my own insecurities and how they had played a role in my decisions. I had always been afraid of being alone and had settled for less than I deserved because of that fear. I knew I needed to work on myself and build my self-esteem if I wanted to have a healthy relationship in the future. As the week came to an end, I felt a mix of emotions. I was sad about the end of my marriage, scared about raising a child on my own, and hopeful about the future. I knew it was going to be a long and difficult journey, but I was determined to come out stronger on the other side. Thanks for reading. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day!